Hey y'all, insight number 4. So we're going over to the first book of Samuel, which obviously Samuel wrote, but when he got older. He was retelling what happened at this point when he was younger, probably with some help from Eli, the priest. But anyway, so this is after Kings. So this is after Judges. So this is the first book of the Kings. So when there was kings instead of judges. So this is like the first book that happens in there. But this is not looking at the royalty part. This is looking more at the religious sort of line through there. Anyway, so we're starting off with this. We're going to start off with Hannah. Hannah, who prays for a son. Now, Hannah is the second wife of a lady called Peninnah, or we just call her Penny because Peninnah is a bit long. And their husband was Elkanah, sweetest husband, by the way. So, Penny had given several children, including some sons, and Hannah had none. And yet, she still got an equal portion from her husband. So he was treating her fairly, even though she had not yet provided children. And she's aging, probably not. And they did year by year, they went up to pay respect to the Lord at what was a temple or like a sacred place that was where the priest lived. It's got a really long name that I'm not even going to attempt. But yeah, so they went up there every year. So in verse 8, basically in verse 7, like she was so depressed as they'd gone up and her prayers had not been answered yet again, but they were going up to give thanks to the Lord, and she had complete faith. But she was just like, I really want this, and it just wasn't happening for her. So she wasn't eating. She was depressed and sad. And in verse 8, he's like, this is Elkanah says to her, why are you crying? I don't mind that you haven't given me sons. I'll always look after you. It's fine. Don't cry, hon. I'm just like, oh, what a sweet guy. But she rose up and she went to the place to pray, which is a Shiloh. And in 11 she vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, if thou wilt give me a man-child, I will give him unto the Lord in all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. So there we have the Nazirite vow again, the one that we talked about with Samson. That's where this is coming in again, that he will serve you the entire days of his life, that I will bring him back and give him over to the priest and say, here's the child, like even if that's the only child I ever get, please just bless me with a baby, a man child. But so she's praying there, and when you're praying and you're in that turmoil of just like, oh my gosh, there's tears and there's weeping, and you like sometimes you shake and you're just like pouring your heart out, and it's very like spiritually draining, but it's also physically moving. So she's moving her lips with the words she's saying, even though she's not speaking out loud. Eli, the priest, sees her and comes over and says to her, are you drunk? Like, you okay? Because she's like been there a while and kind of looking like a crazy lady, which I'm sure a lot of us do when we pray like that. But in 15, this is where she says, and Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thine handmaid for a daughter of Belial, which is a version of Baal, which is those nasty, horrible gods that we don't believe in because they're not real. And out for the abundance of my compliance and grief have I spoken hitherto. And then in 17, then Eli answered and said, go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him. In 18, we read that her countenance was no more sad because she had found grace in his sight, which is so beautiful that she was happy. So what's the thing is, turning to Christ, we can find peace and joy even from a place of sorrow, because that's what she did. She was sad, she wasn't eating, so she went to pray to the Lord in the place where they prayed, because that's what they did. Now we pray in our homes every day, but this is what they did there. It's like probably like us going to the temple and having a prayer. It's just that extra, So yeah, how can we find peace and joy even from a place of sorrow? So Eli mistook Hannah as a drunk. And I'm like, I just thought, I put down here, I guess if anyone observes some of my pleadings to the Lord, they might think I was drunk too, or a bit crazy. However, in turning to the Lord in heartfelt, complete supplication, Hannah's prayers are heard. They are also answered. The lesson here is that in verse 18, knowing that she had been heard, that her countenance was no longer sad, not just her face, but her spirit. Answers take time, yet with Christ and knowing that we are heard, we can find peace and joy in the midst of sorrow. Because often, like while we still want the answer, the comfort comes in knowing that we've been heard, that we've been listened to, that somebody acknowledges our suffering and sorrow. And often that is enough to bring us some joy in the midst of that sorrow. But there's always things that we can do to find peace and joy even from a place of sorrow. It's there. It takes effort. It's not easy. It's not a quick fix, but it does help you to find that. Now, there's a ton of quotes on finding joy in places and everything, but I like this one again from Elder Uchtdorf. I know I quote him a lot, but he does say some really good stuff. So he said, when we are grateful to God in our circumstances, we can experience, and there's the key word, we can, it's a choice, we can experience gentle peace in the midst of tribulation. In the cold of bitter sorrow, we can experience the closeness and warmth of heaven's embrace. I know that's true. I absolutely can testify of that. I absolutely know that's true. And the coldness of sorrow, if we make that effort, no matter what our circumstances, we can feel that warmth and closeness of heaven's embrace. And that's what Hannah felt that night. It's like her prayer hadn't been answered yet. The priest told her that it's going to happen, but it hadn't happened yet. It does, and we'll read about that. But at that point, it was just like someone heard me, someone acknowledged that I was suffering, and someone cared enough to say, it'll be okay. And she knew the Lord was hearing her, but someone else heard her too. So that's another thing you can do. How can you go and help someone? How can you hear someone and help them through their sorrowful moments or whatever circumstance they're in? How can you properly minister to them and hear that? It's a good question too. All right, so that's that one. We're going to finish up over in chapter 2, verses 6 to 10. I'll see you there soon.